Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. All right, welcome back, Aspire Leaders and Teach Better family. I am back with my monthly guest. I had mentioned this last month that I have the wonderful Mitch Weathers of Organized Binder with me. He is a wonderful friend and a great mind to pick at. So I'm going to do that. I know that Mitch with Organized Binder, executive functioning skills are a huge part of what you're all about. And I really wanted to explore more on our conversation last month. So before we dive in, I wanted to say thank you so much once again for joining me on Aspire to Lead.
No, my pleasure. Glad to be here. Thrilled to be a monthly guest, Josh.
Yes.
So let's chat. Start picking. I love the unscripted nature of these conversations. So
what I was talking about prior to pushing record was just the fact that I think this is just an untapped topic, and I love having you as kind of a resource, but then also someone that, you know, you're diving into this subject every single day. And so I think these conversations are extremely helpful for folks. And then, you know, for the audience, if you're listening and you have some more questions for myself or Mitch in regards to executive functioning skills, please reach out and let us know. We'd love to address it, and maybe even do, Mitch, like a Q&A session sometime if we get enough questions for an episode.
Yeah, that would be a blast. Let's do it.
We'll give some folks some shout outs too. So I'll post that on social media also, and maybe we can do that for our next month bonus episode.
Our May episode.
Yeah, our May episode. It's crazy to say that. So this year is flying by. All right, so I'm looking at some questions here for you, bud. All right, let's talk about routines and structures, because I think you had touched on this a little bit on our last conversation, but I wanted to kind of dive in deeper, because I do feel like this is kind of a foundation on what you offer schools and what you talk about. And I'm curious on just kind of what your viewpoint is with the role of routines and structures and how they play in the development of executive functioning skills in the classroom.
Right. That's a great question. And routines in and of themselves are not inherently an executive functioning developmental tool, although I think are one of the keys. But routines, if we just back up on what routine does for students and for teachers, it just makes for more predictable learning spaces. And I unpack this quite a bit in my book, that, you know, inherent to learning is risk-taking. And inherent to risk-taking is failure.
Right.
And depending on your lived experience as a young person or as a student, my willingness, there it is. my willingness to kind of lean into that risk, just said plainly, like for some, that's like, okay, yeah, it's fine. I might fail at this. And for others, it's like, no, that's not, I don't have that. I'm not comfortable with that at this point. And so what I've seen just in my own practice is the more predictable the learning environment, in other words, create a routine and stick to it. Never, ever change that routine. And what I've had teachers say to me over the years is, oh my gosh, that feels like I'm kind of like hogtied a little bit, like that. I'm just going to do the same routine. And I try to emphatically stress this, that like, hey, be as creative and engaging, as crazy as you want to be with your curriculum and your content. And I would even say that's kind of a call to action or a responsibility, right? That amplifying engagement around these things and concepts that we're learning. Don't get creative with your routine. Just how you begin, how you transition, where you put your stuff, how you conclude. Just keep that consistent, because the more predictable the environment, the safer I feel. And I've seen this. And if I routinely, not just on once, like it doesn't come about in one day or 1 week, but if I routinely find myself feeling safer, then perhaps I might be more willing to lean in and take some of those risks that are inherent to learning, which then I can start to experience some success that maybe I haven't. So I'm a big believer in routine, and I love that conversation. And I'm just looking right over your left shoulder, if I'm right, the Teach Better book and content and the grid method and all that your team is involved in, which is really about that lesson, like the content, the instruction, which is just as important what I like to say is the routine is kind of what is surrounding all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And in our industry, I think we've, for good reason, have focused, maybe overly focused on the content or the standards or the instructional piece. Again, not better or worse. It's just we can't do that and not look at routine. And then if you take that, sorry, it's a little bit of a long-winded answer. If you establish the routine, so there's 3 keys for teaching executive functions: clarity, routine, and modeling. And the routine I outline in the book gives students practice with executive functioning skills. So we bring about clarity by establishing this routine and modeling, hence the binder, the organized binder piece. So I'm seeing it modeled for me. And then every day, by virtue of participating in this routine, which is just what the Waldorf community calls kind of the rhythm of the day. It's just how we get through the school day or the class period. If by virtue of engaging in that routine, I get practice with these skills and habits. But here's the key, Josh, and hopefully this is eliciting, getting some questions going for our May event, is I'm practicing these skills within the context of whatever subject or grade level I'm learning, right? So what it's not, executive functioning skills are not learned through a curriculum, right? And that's why I say in the book too, like, executive functioning skills aren't taught in the kind of traditional sense of the word. They're best learned when students see them modeled, and I get daily practice by virtue of this routine. It's like I might be in my 9th grade math class or my 5th grade class or whatever. So routine. It's foundational.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Okay, so I want to dive into the kind of the next step, right? Because, let's say a teacher or leader is thinking about trying to execute this in the classroom, and now they're looking at their lesson plans and the activities that they have set up for that. How can they start to incorporate executive functioning skills into those 2 areas, both in the lesson plan and the various activities?
First, I would say is look at the overall lesson plan, or if I'm a school leader, is there a lesson template for everybody on campus? And we kind of just have these steps throughout the lesson, and it creates a structure or a template or a scaffold, if you will, for all teachers' lessons. And now there's something that we can be collective about. And if that routine, each step of that, regardless of what the lesson is, then it doesn't really matter what the activity is per se, or the content we're learning, if by virtue of this routine. And I would encourage you to check out the book, because each step is a different executive functioning skill. Like, we start with flexing your working memory through retrieval practice, which helps clear up misconceptions and boost retention. Anybody can do that. That's not right. We do the same thing at the end of the lesson, and now we've made for bell-to-bell instruction a reality. So there's all this happening, and you have to also be back to that word clarity. What are the executive functioning skills that you believe your students will benefit from? I'm pretty clear about that in the book. I think there's 6 that are truly foundational, and they also start to influence other executive functioning skills, because that term, as you know, it's kind of an umbrella term.
Yes.
So just being deliberate about that. Like, for me, I outline, let's flex our working memory, right? We know that's going to help with retention. There's a lot there, boosting, clearing up misconceptions, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Next step, though, it's absolutely clear about time and task management. I'm going to take a moment to introduce the lesson, but doing so in a way that gives students practice with, how do you keep a calendar? How do you start to manage your time? How do you plan out the next 3 weeks if this is a project-based environment? But it's very clear that that's the skill or the habit we're working on. And step 3, organization, right? To embed it into each lesson, my encouragement to the school leader or the individual teacher is create that template, which is basically the routine. What's each step? Why are we doing it? And recognize that it can't take a lot of time, because although I've never met a teacher who doesn't want their students to develop these skills, right? Have you ever met a teacher? It's like, yeah, goal setting, that's not important, right? No, of course not. But we don't have enough time to get through what we're tasked with teaching in the first place. So we can't come in and be like, oh, great executive functioning work. It's got to have a smaller time footprint, and hence the routine.
Yeah, I think anything that's going to be less time, but then also easy to implement, is going to be something that is sustainable for a campus, for those who are in leadership and are trying to implement this. You had talked about, Mitch, in regards to the back end of a lesson, which is, the assessment piece. And I don't know if me and you have really talked about this, but I was just curious on like how teachers and educators can assess the executive functioning skills needed, and if their students are actually obtaining these skills.
Yeah, it's a good question. Having some type of awareness. I will say, gosh, there's a lot there that I want to respond to. But when you bring up the word assessment, what the routine, so the beginning and then concluding routine that I outline in the book is it's about flexing a student's working memory, which is going to boost retention, and we can clear up misconceptions, and we utilize underutilized class time. There's a lot in those two. In fact, when I wrote that first chapter, what's not the first chapter? I think it's the third chapter in the book, Josh. It was so long that it became 2 chapters, because, in terms of the executive function, it's working memory, flexing your working memory, retrieval practice, spacing, all that kind of stuff. But beginning and concluding routine became their own chapters. And a big part of that is it's 100% about formative feedback for the teacher, right? And the more I can have ongoing, authentic feedback, the better I am able to adjust mid-unit, mid-lesson even, to tailor what I'm doing to best meet the needs of my students. And somebody said to me one time, the formative assessment's like your wellness checkup when you go to the doc. And the more times you go to the doctor and you have just small checkups, probably the better. The summative assessment's the autopsy. You're dead. The unit's done, or it's done. So let's see how we did. And we can't rely, not to say that summative assessments don't have their place, but if we overly rely on that data, we're missing that ongoing opportunity for formative feedback. In terms of recognizing when students develop their executive functioning skills, that's a phenomenal thing to see happen if you're lucky enough to catch it. So hence, one of the executive functions outlined in the book is accountability. Because just because I'm modeling for students organizational skills and we're engaging with that skill in the third step of the routine every single day, I still need to have some accountability to say, hey, that's hence the modeling. Here's my portfolio. Yours needs to look like mine, right? And when students not only learn to get organized, when they learn to get and stay organized, you'll see it. And some of that comes from, we call it a binder check with organized binder. And tab D, if you can, for those of you listening, if you know what an organized binder looks like, but it's a blue tab, it's a D, it's not referenced to a grade or anything, but that's our binder check. So once we recommend periodically every 4 weeks, sometimes more, sometimes less, you just stop and say, hey, does your binder look like the class sample? Does it look like mine? Right? And that first one might take some time. We have this peer check where they get to switch them and check a neighbors and finding mistakes, and they get to put it all back together when they get their binder back with the feedback before the teacher comes around and checks it. That process might take a little bit longer at the beginning of the school year. And as we progress, it's really cool to see how, like, oh yeah, that's a quick check because I know it. I'm starting to make it my own. And that's true of any of these executives. The first time we set goals, it's a little like, I won't say forced, but to be honest, a lot of students and adults for that matter, a lot of young people and adults have never actually really set goals. And the template that's in Organized Binder makes it entirely possible. It's very streamlined. And honestly, outside of a 504 and an IEP, students may not. And if you have 20 goals on your IEP, which no IEP should have more than 5, in my opinion, it's this foreign thing. So, but if I set goals, and the key with the Organized Binder template is an actionable daily task. And in our guide for families that goes home, now my family and caregivers and guardians know that, hey, here's my goal, but here's my daily task. And there's an accountability piece. Am I going to do that each day? That now becomes part of the class. It becomes part of this school year. And so as we progress and we reset our goals, we look for evidence. Is it working? You can start to see students develop these. But to say, there's an executive functioning assessment that would be kind of I think that'd be a little bit inauthentic. And to be honest, where kids really start to get it, and I say kids loosely, and if anybody's out there that's used Organized Binder, please write in and share this. But I can say, obviously, I've used Organized Binder over the years, and it's when students get to college and even graduate school. And get this, I don't know if I told you this story. The Organized Binder office is in this like co-working space that I've shown you, right? It's like a co-offices. Everyone's got their offices. And this is no exaggeration. I get a knock on the door, which never happens, right? Everyone's just in their offices, right? And there's a gentleman standing at my office door, and I go over and open the door, and I'm like, you've had that, like, it's a student you haven't seen for like a long time, like a long time. And I'm like, Christian? He's like, Mr. Weathers. And he found out that he's a contractor, general contractor, went to college here in Sacramento State. And he works for a firm. He's a foreman for these large commercial projects. So we're catching up. But I'm like, he's like, I heard about Organized Binders here too. So I found out your office number and I came, and I just wanted to tell you, he said, congratulations on your book being a *1 bestseller. How is a student from 10 years ago even tracking that? And I was like, oh my gosh, thanks. Like, I didn't even know you knew I wrote a book. And he said, I just want you to know that all of those things you taught me in high school, those aren't just school and academic skills. Like, I use that stuff every day in work. And I just want you to know that. I want to say thanks. So that's where you start to see the evidence, is when students write back and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm using this in college. Like, it's because I say that because, and I talk about this in the book, there's a cognitive load to trying to learn something new, like a new skill, a new habit, right? I'm focusing, I'm trying. But then once I make it my own, it moves into my subconscious, which frees up that capacity, right? I'm not using those mental calories to try to learn it, but now I can take it with me. It's mine. And the evidence of that is typically in lived experiences. It's like, oh yeah, I do know how to get organized. Like, check this out, So I hope that answers your question. Hope I'm not rambling too much.
You're not rambling at all. I think it is a very big topic, and we're just touching it slightly with these monthly conversations. And I just want folks to understand that Mitch is a huge resource. And so with that, Mitch, if folks are looking for more information, you obviously talked about your book, which I held up for those who are on YouTube. And there's a slight Colorado sun glare on this, but you can see executive functions for every classroom, create safe and predictable learning environments. And this is a beautiful resource, one that a lot of people are buying. So definitely check that out. For those who are watching on YouTube, you also saw the organizedbinder.com link that's up on the screen. So is there, for teachers, leaders, Mitch, if they're looking for additional resources in regards to this topic, where would you send them?
If you just want to peruse on your own, obviously the Organized Binder website, and go to the blog. There's, we have resources there, but you know me, Josh, I would rather just hear from you. If you're listening and you're like, hey, just shoot me an email. It's pretty simple. It's Mitch@organizedbinder.com. Or if you forget that, just go to Organized Binder and send in a contact form and say, hey, I listened to Mitch and Josh, and it'll get to me. But I so much rather just start. I prefer starting with a conversation as opposed to someone just perusing on their own. But if you do, again, check out the website, pick up a copy of the book. Of course, it's on Amazon. You can also get it at our website, but Amazon's free shipping. Just trying to help people out if you have Prime. Right. But yeah, shoot me an email. I would love to hear from you, or send in, this Q&A next time. That'd be kind of fun. If you have some questions, you can put them in the chat or email them to you, right? Is that what we're doing?
For sure. Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, folks know how to reach out to me. Obviously you can go to joshstamper.com, just like Mitch was talking about on his website. There's a contact form there. Joshua@teachbetter.com. I've said it many times. And of course, we'll have all the links for Mitch and I within either the podcast platform, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the description, we'll have, the various links to get a hold of us. But yeah, we want to continue the conversation, and we want to make sure that we're bringing value for those who are listening too. So if there's something that you want us to touch on, or maybe expand on something that Mitch has talked about, in regards to several topics that we've discussed the last 2 months, obviously we want this to benefit those who are listening. Mitch is not making this up too. Like, if you reach out to him, he will respond. He's great about connecting with folks. I've seen it firsthand in many different aspects. In fact, the first time I reached out to Mitch, we got on a Zoom call right away. Love talking with Mitch. He's a great guy, great friend, and someone that is extremely helpful in the world of education. I'm just honored, Mitch, to do this monthly with you. And with that, I appreciate your time today, and can't wait for next month.
See you then. Thanks, Josh.